Well, a lot to dive into with the mayor of Kansas City, Quinton Lucas, joining us on a Thursday morning on KCMO Talk Radio. And 1 week from now, we will be getting set for Chiefs kickoff. Of course, they'll be opening up the season against the Detroit Lions. So something tells me, Mr. Mayor, we'll have plenty to talk about next week, but we appreciate you being here this week on KCMO.
It is great to be with you. As you know, I'm excited for Chiefs season. I think they are no small part of the reason I was reelected pretty easily. So hopefully more Super Bowls over the years ahead.
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt, right, with everything going on, to get the rah-rah mentality of the football team here in town. It's been absolutely outstanding the last few years. So before we get to some of the Chiefs stuff next week, there's a lot of things going on this week that I want to ask you about. I want to start off with Governor Parson. I want to play for you a clip the governor told Fox 2 in St. Louis about, this was more specific to St. Louis, but it applies to Kansas City as well. And that is gun ordinances that you have passed here in town that the governor has some questions on. Here's what the governor had to say, and then we'll get your response.
Here's what I would say. I think you got to be very careful to stay in your lanes. So cities can't just go out there and do what they want to do. And when there's a constitutional issue to it or state legislatures to it, they can't supersede that.
So what he's referring to in part, of course, and we talked about this earlier in the month, two ordinances that the city passed here. The first would ban those 18 and younger from buying bullets without parental consent. The second bans switches, which are used to modify handguns into automatics. Both of those, as we talked about, are violations of federal law already. So how would you respond to the governor and what he had to say there?
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to your show a lot since we proposed those. Both of those were criticized by many because they said, well, heck, it's already illegal. So for us, I mean, I can't speak to the St. Louis legislation, but for us, we're basically giving our police officers more tools to take these items off the streets and to incarcerate and arrest folks who have them. That's about it there. Now, the AR-15, I think AK-47 issue in St. Louis may be a different one. I haven't read the legislation. I do commend any city that I think is doing what it needs to do. It's interesting. People tell us to stay in our lanes, but they also tell us, hey, we've got too many people dying on the streets. Cities are too dangerous. So I commend any mayor in the state of Missouri, whether the big cities or small ones, who's doing everything they can to make sure their people can be as safe as possible. And, I've shared that with my good friend, the governor, before. And this might be an area, I think, on the Kansas City proposals, we may actually have agreement as to what we can do. But I would think he would expect us to do as much as we can to keep the people of Kansas City, St. Louis, or anywhere in Missouri safe.
All right. So on that front, do you anticipate anything more when it comes to legislation, ordinance like these passing through City Council, or is these two the only things that you had planned, let's say, for the foreseeable future?
I expect a lot more. I don't know if you know, I just hired a new general counsel, brilliant kid out of Harvard Law School. My goal is to be as absolutely creative as I can be to make sure that the citizens of this community will be as safe as possible. And that includes using every lawful method under Missouri's laws and the United States Constitution and our Code of Ordinances to make sure the people of Kansas City can be safe. So I think you are bound to see a lot more in terms of what we can do to make sure not only our citizens are safe, but also our law enforcement officers. Right now in Kansas City, it's easier to stop a 16-year-old with a 30-pack of Coors Light, have them pour out the beer, all of that, write them a ticket, make them go to counseling, than it seems to do the same sometimes with folks who are walking the streets with far more serious and deadly products.
Well, we'll be seeing what you guys have proposed on that front going forward. Mayor of Kansas City, Quinton Lucas, is on KCMO. I got to ask you, just because we're down the home stretch here, any conversation since we spoke last with the Kansas City Royals?
Yeah, I keep talking to the Kansas City Royals because here's the thing that professionals do, and I mean this with the greatest respect to everybody who's involved in the process and is kind of, saying, hey, pick me. You have real chats, you have real conversations, and you handle those like professionals. What you don't do necessarily is go out and then tweet 2 seconds later that Pete and I have a confidential deal where he'll take over KCMO radio or something. Instead, you have those negotiations, you see how far they go, and then when you have something to announce, you do. I have said for some time, I'm not interested in a beauty contest. I'm interested in how do we come to responsible and reasonable terms, long-term, for the best interests of the taxpayers of Kansas City, hopefully the Kansas City Royals, and everybody here in Royals country, Missouri and Kansas. That's what Kansas City government will be involved in. Any others who are doing whatever or talking to you about why they're cool or why others aren't, I think that's kind of playing games.
What have you guys talked about?
Well, that's, my favorite thing, Pete, is every week I come on this show, and you're one of the few journalists in the city who actually ask real questions about what's going on, right? Everybody else wants to kind of be a he said, she said, whatever, is there this, that, or the other, and kind of read our tweets. But I do appreciate that. In terms of what we talked about, I don't think I'll go in depth. Pointing back to my last statement, all I'll say is this. I think the Kansas City Royals continue to have strong and vibrant conversations, not just with the city of Kansas City, but also other partners in the region to see what can work out for the best deal terms long term. Once we get to, I think, a good point on that, we'll have more conversations, certainly with the public, as to what that might look like for Kansas City. But, I don't think they want to necessarily negotiate in public. I've appreciated that relationship with them, with us. Maybe other counties will do that sort of thing in other jurisdictions, but I'm going to keep our contract negotiations between us, which is, of course, allowed under the Missouri Sunshine Law.
Well, speaking of reading your tweets, I always try to, see as many as I can, but you put a lot of stuff out there. One thing I was kind of taken aback by here was when, you noted your plans for the day. And you said that you're going to join the transgender community and allies to discuss responses to draconian laws in Missouri going into effect today. For those that don't know, of course, this week in Missouri, adults are free to do as they please in Missouri. Children who have already started transitioning can continue that process, but the law does ban any children from starting the transition process in the state of Missouri. Does Mayor Quinton Lucas genuinely believe that when it comes to children is draconian to prevent such a thing?
I believe that families should have a right to come to determinations of responsible care for members of their families, full stop. And so, I think, first of all, a lot of the discussion, and I see these tweets and all these other things along the way where people talk about castrations or other procedures. Sorry for talking about that in the morning. I don't think that is in any way what is typically being prescribed. You have different treatments that are not irreversible. You have folks mainly receiving pharmaceuticals at certain times. For example, a 17-year-old male who presents as a female who doesn't want to grow a beard or something of that sort. I mean, these are the sorts of things that actually, first of all, there have been prescriptions of growth hormones for years. There have been other prescriptions for how you can handle periods, any number of things. I'm not going to get far out of turn of where my experience is, but these things exist for reasons very different than what we have here. And it seems like the Missouri legislature has tried to get into the middle of something that I don't think they have full information on. I think had they written a narrower law that speaks to different medical interventions, particularly surgeries, then they'd be on long-term much better legal footing with what they're trying to do and much better moral footing long term. But I think when you look at some of the things that they have tried to speak to banning, up to and including potentially therapies and talking to people about what it is that they are feeling, what it is that they are obtaining and representing, I think that's going to be long term harmful. And so that's what I think is draconian. I think that's why a lot of other states have not allowed this sort of change to go into effect. Governor Kelly vetoed this in Kansas and was not overridden by, I think, a lone vote. And I think this will be long-term harmful in a way that Missouri just doesn't need right now, given our other priorities.
So even though these things, have not been FDA approved, what I'm hearing there is you didn't like some of the ideas that also were talked about in Jeff City, and maybe some of those ideas were too much, but in the end, what they did was basically say, hey, kids, you're going to have to wait till you're 18. And obviously there's plenty of things in this world that we require people to wait till they're 18 to do, right? I mean, that's reasonable.
We do require a lot of things to wait till they're 18, although the amazing thing in Missouri, right, any parent, I don't think you're trying to get rid of this, can hand their kid, per our other conversation, an AR-15 and say, let's go shooting, right? That's something that's totally lawful. Actually, in connection with religious ceremonies and others, you can give your kid alcohol. You can do a lot of things, actually, in Missouri. And in this, I think what we're talking about is, can a family make a decision about their child getting counseling of some sort? Can a family make a decision about their child's medical care? Those are things that have been fundamental about the child-parent relationship for years. There have been cases to the Supreme Court saying, if you want your kids to, be able to learn German, you can. And the court struck down state law saying otherwise. So I think this is a step back from the choices of families to be able to come up with the best outcomes for their children. And I think that should be consistent in the same way it is for education, for firearms, for other healthcare decisions as it is here.
Mayor Lucas is on KCMO. I want to ask you about, We were just talking about this early this morning. Mitch McConnell freezing up for the second time in a month. You may have seen that. I'm sure most people have seen it by now. He's standing there at the podium. He ends up freezing, and he literally doesn't have anything to say for 30 seconds, it looks like. We know that this country's run by a bunch of people who, you probably would. I don't think Quinton Lucas would hire him to be a greeter at City Hall. I don't think that you would do it. But we got him running the country. As a younger man in the political space right now, do you think that we should have some type of age limit like what we have on the front end? I mean, we've got age minimums to be in Congress and be the president and be in the Senate. Does Quinton Lucas think there should be age maximums?
Oh, man, Pete, you're going to kill my ability to ever get appointed to anything. What I'll say is this. I think age presents itself in a lot of different ways. There are some who are very active, spry, not running into issues at certain ages. There are some who, even younger than the age of a Senator McConnell or Senator Feinstein, run into different concerns. I would hope that each senator, and we've seen situations presenting themselves. I read a story this morning actually about Senator Feinstein and an estate dispute and her family and her daughter's got power of attorney and all these sorts of things. I would hope families are having good conversations with their parents. I hope staffs are having good conversations with their bosses about what's best for their medical care. And I have no idea about, how Senator McConnell is doing. I pray for his health. I pray that he and his family are doing well. But, what I did see yesterday was something where maybe the person to talk to him isn't necessarily his state political director, but it's somebody to say, hey, are you feeling okay? Do you need more time? I know Senator McConnell had a pretty bad fall not that many months ago that I think has certainly had an impact on his health thereafter. And so I would hope people have more of these conversations. That's all I would say. And in the same way that, frankly, we do with our own families here in Kansas City right now, right? If mom's been driving for a long time, but we're seeing, maybe perhaps she's not in a position to do so now, that's a tough chat, but it's one we need to have. And I think it's importantly one we probably need to make sure we're having with our elected officials more regularly, too. I know that's part of the Republican presidential race. I think Nikki Haley makes that point a lot. I think in some ways there is at least some reason for a discussion to make sure that you're seeing that people are healthy and well.
Well, you jokingly being worried about a potential appointment is one of the more transparent answers we've very much appreciated here recently on KCMO. So thank you very much for the time. We'll end it on that note, Mr. Mayor, and we will talk to you next week.
Pete, I just want to be ambassador to the Bahamas after I'm done. No, I'm kidding. I have a good weekend, everybody. Enjoy Labor Day.
Sign me up for that. That is the mayor of Kansas City, Quinton Lucas, on KCMO. Can't believe he just said that. He literally just said, you're going to mess up my chance at an appointment with that answer. Oh, gosh. That one, I just couldn't help but laugh because I was like, damn, that was honest.